Hey everybody, we got the Landis out today. So part 3 of the bag video, we are going to finish this up, and the first thing we need to do is the tubular handles. So the leather we're using on this bag is Weaver's Select Bridal. They just started offering it in lighter weights, so they only used to offer it in like 12 ounce. This is a 5/6, but for handles I like it a little slimmer. So we're going to use our Landis splitter. This machine is like 100 years old. I think it was refurbished at some point. I bought it maybe 10 years ago for $200 or $300. I think they go for a lot more now. To be honest with you, we rarely use this. The only thing we use this for is to split our belt ends down to use them as keepers. It's really not good for much thicker, like wider than 2-inch leather strips. It's a belt strip splitter. It's not like a splitter you split hides with. But I've dialed it down, I've sharpened the blade. It's usually also not very good at splitting already thin leather. We're gonna give it a go. So the way that this works is you feed the leather into this side, you use the crank, it pulls the leather into, this is the blade, and it splits the leather. So if this works, which I think it should, you'll see the split leather come out on top and the split come out on bottom, meaning this is the waste coming out on the bottom. So let's give this a go. I have 2-inch strips cut that we should be good to go to make our tubular handles. I'm going to do 3 of them. So we have, I split down 3 pieces around 3.5 ounces, and with the splitter it's like kind of random, so I just kind of use the dial to get as close as I can, and then I split them down a little bit slimmer for the liner, and this is what you end up with. This is the split. So this is literally why it's called split, is because it's the stuff that's left over after splitting. It's all fiber, no grain. And so this is thick stuff. This is a 6mm leather core. And I'm going to go with, I think, 12 inches in length for this, for the length of my short handles. So I'm just going to measure out 12 inches. And you can also use nylon. If you've watched our other videos, you can use nylon core, you can use thicker or thinner leather core. It all depends on the look and the feel you're going for. So we have our 2 cores cut out. And this core is going to span these 2 D-rings. So you can see it gives it a nice grip without being too long. These are kind of farther spread out than I would normally do because of this pocket. If we made it any closer, it would just kind of have an unusable small pocket. So, you know, it's a give and take on the design. We are going to sew these directly onto the D-ring. We're not going to, like on this bag, we're not going to sew them flat like this. We're going to wrap them around the D-ring. So we are going to have a little bit more length once this is all done. These will sit probably about here. So I went to sew the straps on the bag. I screwed up. This is not, obviously I was going to cut this down, but I needed a pattern. This just didn't work. It's too wide, I can't cut it. So what I did was, we have a bunch of old Louis Vuitton handles from bags we've cut up. So I actually took one apart because this is exactly, you can see how these attach to they use square rings, which we should have used, but I wanted to keep everything copper, and they only had copper D-rings. This is what we're looking for. To do this, I've only done this 2 or 3 times ever, and it was 5 or 6 years ago. So you really need a pattern. So what I did was I took one apart and I made a little paper template, and this is what we have. So I'm just going to redo it. There's going to be no liner. You can see there's no liner here. I think it would bulk it up too much in such a small space because I don't want to do a huge handle. So I'm just going to go through again, glue everything down, fold it up, stitch it, and we'll come back to you when we're ready to install. All right, redo, which happens sometimes. Here's our new one. You can see that this is much slimmer. Now, I could have trimmed this down kind of. I don't know. It was just easier to make a new one using the pattern from that other one. And so what I've done, I have, again, just counting stitches, right? So I have 5 stitch holes on either side, 5 stitch holes on either side when we fold this over onto our bag. It's fairly simple. We're gonna go in the D-ring. This is 3/4 inch wide, and it's just gonna fold over, and we'll start stitching from one side. We'll go up, we'll do some fancy looping here just to fill all the stitch holes, come down, and I'm actually gonna double stitch, so I'll back stitch the entire thing on both sides. And then we'll add a pop rivet right here, and then the handle will be done, and we'll finish sewing on the bottom of the bag, which I started off camera because it took 2.5 hours. So we'll finish that up and we should be good to go. So now I'm just gonna sand these down. I have some, what is this? 320 grit. You could use a little heavier grit if you have a lot to even out. And I'm just wrapping it around my bone folder. I'm just gonna kind of go carefully. And take my time. You don't want to run, if you loop around the, I don't want to run into the thread there. This is one of those times where it's almost more like woodwork than leather work, because we're basically just wanting to flatten everything out, and then we'll get in there and kind of bevel whatever edges we can reach before we burnish. So these are looking okay. Not my best work, but I've only done this handle maybe 3 or 4 times. So that's why I'm doing it on my personal bag, just practice. And I'm gonna add a pop rivet right there. So I have my 2 holes. We're going to go over to the press and add a matching copper rivet on the top here. So now we're sewing in our bottom. And as you can see, I've pretty much sewn around the entire thing off camera. This takes a long time. It's really awkward. You can't really see it, but we usually shoot with natural light from window that way. I have a big softbox right up above me, not for the video, but just so I can see inside. And you just kind of have to go super slow. We counted our stitches. Everything's lining up perfect, but there's really no easy way to do this if you're doing it by hand. So I'm just going a little bit at a time, and this is the real speed of it all. And eventually you get through. And as you can see, we're about 3 stitches away from being done with it. And what I'm doing is just like a stitching pony, because it stands up on its own. I'm just tightening my stitches as I go. And then I time my back stitches to be at these stress points here so that I just have double thread just in case. Alright, so the bag is pretty much done. I'm not going to add the shoulder straps because this is 3 parts already. If I make a shoulder strap, I'll just make it. I am going to add like one little thing that we'll do a video on because it's going to be a molded case that's going to hang off the front, but that'll be later on. The last step, even though this is Hot Stuff Bridal, I am going to use the Fiebing's Aussie conditioner because I take this to the beach, I take this everywhere, and it'll just be an added, I think there's actually sand in this, take it to the beach. It'll just be some added protection. It also smooths everything out. You know, when you make a bag like this, it's floating around the bench for a few days and it picks up little scuffs and stuff. So oiling it just helps we can oil it and then buff it out. And that'll just remove all those little marks and stuff and kind of hydrate up the leather. If you've been doing any edge dyeing, like on our black edges here that we dyed, make sure that you oil those because it'll rehydrate that. Anytime you dye something, it pulls moisture out of the leather. So I'll make sure to get all of my edges and generally just the whole bag. And like I do with everything, I'm gonna kind of over wax this. You're gonna see a little extra. And that's because I'm gonna let it sit for a while to let the leather absorb it before I wipe it away. And here we go. This is the final bag. I'm super psyched on it. This came out great. I honestly, like, I usually just use natural veg tan. I make bags quick. My old one was just woven in an hour. This is probably by far the most intricate bag that I've ever carried personally. But I love the two-tone. I think it's going to age really uniquely because you have the black will just shine up and get dented and scratched like black does. But this will get darker. It'll get darker along the handles. I actually used a little bit, like a one shade darker brown thread on the handle because it'll age darker than the front of the bag because it's going to be touched all the time. So I'm interested to see how that works if the dark thread matches the patina of the handle more than the lighter thread. I always like to use a little bit darker thread than the brown I'm using because as it ages it'll match, it won't get lighter. Back is the same, nice two pockets, and our little valet tray bottom couldn't have worked any better. I've done a few bags like this. It is time consuming to sew this on this way if you don't have a sewing machine, but it allows you to do pretty much whatever you want with detailing on the sides, whereas if you put everything together, it's kind of hard to get tools down in here to install rivets or sew or whatever you want. And so that's it. The response to this has been great. Thank you so much for all the nice comments. Unfortunately, I don't have a pattern for this. You guys watched me, I kind of just made it totally off the cuff, but maybe we'll work on something. I have the rough measurements down, so maybe I'll try to work with Kaylina to get a pattern together and we can put this online at some point. Probably won't be in the near future though because it's a pretty big project. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Huh? Is this it? Is this how we should do it?
I don't think so.
Oh.